Hello and welcome to this London Embroidery School online class where today we will be making these flower design lace jewellery earrings. These are a really great class if you're fairly new to embroidery and want to try something for a purposeful outcome. As these are going to be seen from all angles, we're really going to think about our finish and working with the structure of the lace itself to get the best final product we can. So let's head over to the equipment and materials section so we can have a little look at what we're going to need to make these beauties today. First off, as we are going to be using some specialist materials today, you're going to need one of our flower design kits from the London Embroidery School website, and some white thread and an embroidery needle that you're comfortable using. I've got a size 10 here. We're also going to need some small scissors to cut off our threads, and you have the optional extra of something like a bullion board to put your beads on, but alternatively a beading mat or just a piece of velvet would work just as well. So opening up our kit, we're just going to bring out the pieces so we've got them all to hand and ready to use. Inside your kit you should have your pieces of lace, which obviously we're going to work on, as well as an assortment of beads and your earring hooks as well that obviously make them into being the earrings. I like to spread mine out so that I've sort of got all the different piles separated, and at least I can sort of see what I've got there and then get the bead or sequin that I'm looking for at that particular moment. Take a piece of your white thread and cut it at a comfortable length. If you're quite new to embroidery and you're not sure what a comfortable length is going to be, then taking a fingertip to elbow length piece of thread is quite a good measurement of like a good controllable length for a single strand piece of thread. So that's a little tip for you there if you don't know what you might like. Go ahead and thread that up into your needle. I'm going to be using the bloom into the eye method today, where I squeeze the thread and roll the fingers back from one another, allowing the threads to go into the eye of the needle. We do have a pro tip on our YouTube channel explaining that a bit further if you need some more help with that, along with the quick knots that we're doing here, where you simply wrap the thread around your finger and roll it off towards the end of the finger, allowing it to twist into a knot. Again, check out the pro tip on that for more details. So taking our lace here today, we're really going to be working with the structure of the lace itself, and so we're going to start up the top here, and what we need to do first of all is to anchor our thread into the lace so that it is nice and secure to work with. This is what we're going to be aiming for with our design, so I'm just going to leave that to one side. And you can see there's two little like knobbly bits in the center of the top flowers here. So try to bring the needle up through one of those as it's nice and dense to give us a good firm hold. Go up and down on the spot. These are called stab stitches, which are very small stitches almost directly on top of one another, but not quite, just catching a fibre or two of the fabric and allowing us to create a really good anchoring base to start with. You can then go ahead and confidently cut off the knot from the back if you wish. This will give you the tidiest finish, although if you're not feeling that confident and you want to leave a tidy knot on the back, you can also do that, as you are working in white thread, so it will be pretty subtle. But you can see even with the knot cut off, the thread is nice and secure. So you need to bring the needle through to the back and then come up where you want the centre of your first sequin to be, which is going to be in this first sort of curve up the top here for me. Then I'm threading a cup down sequin and an opaque seed bead both together onto my needle and bringing that down to the surface of the fabric. We're going to use the seed bead as a stopper, so you want to go back through the sequin on its own and push down through to the back of the lace, which is just going to allow the thread to go through that bead and hold it at the top. When you work on these pieces, you'll need to make sure that as you pull the thread through each time, it's not catching on other bits of lace or when you've got other pieces of embroidery and beading in place, so that you get a nice smooth finish each time. We need to pass through each item twice, so go ahead and come back up through the sequin and bead and then back down through the sequin and lace to make sure that it's all properly secured and that you're ready to move on to your next stitch. When you are, come across to where you want the second center of the sequin to be and repeat the first step. You want to make sure that this stitch isn't too tight between the first and second sequin set, so that you don't force the lace to sort of curl up on itself. If it is curling, just ease off that thread by stretching out the lace once again into its natural form, and then go ahead and stitch again, but this time a little bit more gently. Once again, you'll need to go through the sequin and the bead twice to make sure that they are nice and secure. Repeat this process for the other two curves of this flower at the top here. When you have your first 4 pieces in, flip over to the back, and we're going to finish off this thread by creating some very small shallow stitches just into the back of the lace, again almost on top of one another like we did for the stab stitches, and this is just going to create a knot of sorts to hold everything in place whilst we move on to the next piece of thread. So once you've repeated that 3 or 4 times, you can cut away your excess thread. If you don't feel confident in doing that, do feel free to do a couple of slip knots, but these will be that little bit bulkier, as I mentioned before. If you've got enough thread to carry on and do the other side with, go ahead and pop another quick knot into the end of your thread and repeat the process on the left hand side as you've just done for the right. So if you'd like to take a new piece of thread, fingertip to elbow length, and thread that up into your needle. Along with the how to thread up your needle 4 different ways and quick knots pro tips, we've got a lot of other really great resources on our YouTube channel in the form of other pro tips, as well as sneak peeks into studio life and other things you might enjoy. So you might want to check that out if you've been enjoying this. And there might be some things on there that can help to just elevate your stitching that little bit further. Pop a knot into the end of your thread as well, and we're now going to move on to the second section of our lace earrings, which we're going to fill with these really pretty little seed pearls, as you can see on our finished piece here. I want you to really consider the spacing of your pearls, making sure each one has got enough space each time. And we're going to practice applying beads one at a time. So again, using the dots in the center, do some very small stitches one on top of the other to anchor your thread. As you can see, now that we've got a little bit of weight on the top of our earring piece, you might find it easier to hold those bits between your first and second finger on your non-dominant hand and the thumb and ring finger to control the rest of the lace, as I'm demonstrating here, because that gives you a nice clear clean area in which to work that you can tension with your hand. Go ahead and cut away the knot or tidy up the back, whichever you're going to do, and bring your needle onto the top side where you want to place your first bead. Each stitch should be about the same size as the bead you are applying, so that it sits nice and flat and gets a good secure base. As before, you will need to pass through every bead twice to ensure that it is nice and secure. So go ahead and do that, and then come up where you want to place the next bead and repeat the process until the flower is full. Then you can end off your thread once again as we did before. You're going to get good and practiced at this, and we will go ahead and do the left hand side of this second section in exactly the same fashion. Next, we're going to try a slightly different version of what we have just been working with. So once again, we're going to work with our beads only, but on this very small flower that's sort of got four little sections to it, we're going to create a little bit more height on this one by working our beads in pairs. So take a new piece of thread as before and thread that up as you should be getting used to now. Hopefully you found a method that suits you and you can work with that and get comfortable in that method of working. As before, anchor your thread nice and firmly down into this small last flower section that we've got, as we want a good strong base as always. This is not specific to lace jewellery or lace embroidery in general. This sort of anchoring process is really a basis for almost all embroidery, and so practicing that sort of thing is a really good thing for you to do as you start your stitching journey and get into these really good habits where each time you're really treating the thread and the piece with the respect it deserves right from the off, and so hopefully you should get the best results you can out of your piece by doing that. Trim off when you're ready, and so this time we're going to take two of our opaque beads together Now you want them to come up from one side of the flower to the other, and we're going to cross over the other beads so that they get a little bit of height. So this first set you want to stitch at about the same distance as the two beads are wide together. As before, come back up at the start, go through both of the beads once again, trying to avoid catching your other pieces of lace or embroidery, which will be tricky at this stage. So just be gentle with yourself and patient with the work. And so once they are secured in place, then what you want to do is to go and bring the needle up halfway between the two beads that you have just created on either the upper or lower side. We're going to repeat that process with another two beads now, except this time the center of these two beads is going to lay over the first two beads we applied, and that's going to encourage this second set of beads to sit up and proud over the first set that we put on and give us a little bit more texture than the singly applied beads that we did in the last section. So can you see how that's going to sit up over the top there? So pull that in, and as it tightens, just place the beads how you want them, one either side of the first set of beads. And you've created a little sort of cross shape in this last smallest flower. As before, go through those beads again, but as they are sort of curved over the first set of beads, you'll probably need to treat them separately. So come up through the first, and then down through the second, then down through the lace. Coming onto the back, you can finish off your thread here with some stab stitches and get those nice and secure into place. Again, building up these really good practices to make sure that all our embroidery is of really good standard. And so for our final section, we're going to work on these cute little dangly bits down the bottom here. We're going to take a slightly different approach for this, as we are going to be trying to sort of join them together and work through the body of the lace to help to strengthen them, as they are quite weak. So as before, set up your needle and anchor that into one of the little dangly pieces. I'm starting with the one that's sort of out on its own, depending on whether you're working on the left or the right, but it's sort of separate from the others. Onto this, I'm going to put one of our AB crystals, and you can see how it shines sort of pink and blue and yellow, and that's how you know it's an AB crystal. This is one of our heavier beads, so do make sure it really is secure on there. And again, we're going to pass through that at least twice, possibly 3 times, to make sure it really is secure and sitting nicely onto that little dot at the end there. When you come to being finished with applying the crystal, what I'd like you to do this time is, rather than ending off that piece of thread, I'd like you to angle the needle so that it is going down through the body of the lace itself, so the thread is travelling inside of the lace towards the next section we want to stitch, or the next join across. This is going to be this little bobble a bit further up, onto which we're just going to pop a seed bead. So you can go ahead and stitch that into place once you get there. When you're trying to go through the body of the lace, really grip the lace firmly with that non-dominant hand in between the thumb and forefinger, so that you're squeezing it really flat and secure. And then you can carefully sort of thread the needle through the body of that lace that's being secured by your hand, hopefully not stabbing yourself in the process. Once again, when you're done with this seed bead, you can travel along the next join between the pieces of lace to head over towards the little dangly bits that are in more of a cluster, here shown on the left hand side. You'll have also noticed that at the moment I'm now working with my piece upside down, so that gravity is taking the weight of the beads that I've already applied, and they are resting against my small ring and middle finger on the non-dominant hand, so they're out of the way and I'm not worried about them, which just leaves the first finger and the thumb to expose the area on which I'm now working, and so nothing else sort of can get in my way. It's controlling the lace a lot better for me. When you come to the first little circle of this dangly section, this time we're going to apply a sequin and bead combo. So thread those up onto your thread and bring them down using that seed bead as a stopper once again. Remember to pass through it twice so that it is properly secured before you move on to your next section. Again, as we travel through the lace, it's a little bit like when we were working on the flowers up the top. Make sure you're not pulling your thread too tight and adding extra tension to the lace itself. You just want to travel in between the lace using its own structure and therefore hiding your work effectively, as this is going to be a piece that is seen in the 3D. It's probably going to be seen from behind and from the side when it's worn, as they are earrings. And so for our last bead that we're going to pop on, we're just going to come over to the outermost little bobble and pick up a seed bead and pop that on there for balance so that it looks nice and even with the other side, and that we've got a nice little spray of different embellishments on the small pieces down the bottom here. When you're done, turn over to the back and create your little stab stitches nice and shallow into the back of your last piece here so that we can finish off this thread and then put the final touch of our lace jewellery piece on this piece, which is to add the hook to make it an earring. So on to our last step. As before, we still need a nice piece of thread ready on our needle with a little knot in the end. This time we're definitely going to keep the knot in, as adding the hook is kind of the area of most stress that we're going to create on our lace. So we want to make sure that it's got that extra security of having the knot on the back. But because of the way we're going to apply it, that knot is actually going to sort of get sandwiched inside of the lace, so we're still not going to be able to see it, and it shouldn't be too ugly. Up the top here, you might find that your lace has got a little bit stringy. Cut away anything that is purely stringy, but don't cut away too much, as we do need that end stalk in which to apply the hook itself. You just want to take away what's too weak to hold any sort of pressure that we're going to be adding. A couple of millimeters from the first join, come up through the lace stem itself and go back and forth performing your stab stitches to anchor that thread. What we're going to be doing is to slide the hook onto this piece of stalk that we've got and fold it over, and then through the folded section we're going to stitch back and forth and wrap round and round, and that's going to secure our hook into place. So feed the lace through the bottom of the hook. As you can see here, it's nicely through there, nice and clean, and fold over the excess end, holding that nice and firmly in between your first finger and thumb of your non-dominant hand. Then picking up the needle again, you should be roughly in the same place as you were with your stitching. You can start to stitch back and forth through this area to make it good and strong. You'll want to be holding the fold quite close to the hook itself so that it doesn't flap around too much, because that can get quite tricky. And you'll want to be sure that when you're passing your stitches through they are coming through nice and cleanly and not catching on that hook, because we don't want to create a big loop or end up bending the hook either. When you've been back and forth a few times, hold it very close to the hook so it doesn't flap around, and start to very firmly and tightly wrap some of that excess thread around the stitches you've just created so that it tidies any loose ends you might have. With that done, you can then very firmly pull the needle through all the stitches you've just created, just looking to catch into the stitches that you have done, and again create a good anchor so that we can end off this thread. This sort of wrapping process really gives it a nice clean finish, tucking away any of those loose ends or fibres that might have got a little bit roughed up in the making process of the lace, as well as giving us the ability to add the jewellery part of our lace jewellery piece. When you're done, you can trim away any of the excess, and that is our earrings done. So you can go ahead and do the other earring in the same style. Remember to reverse the design so that you've got a pair if that's what you're looking for, or two of the same if not. And here we have our two finished earrings. Hopefully you're feeling really pleased with what you've created today and that you have learnt some new skills. These are really great and they're such a lovely thing to gift. They'll post really well if it's someone that you can't see at the moment, so do think about sharing your skills and hopefully bringing a little bit of joy to somebody else with something that you've made. Thank you for joining me for this class. We've been the London Embroidery School, and if you would like to find out more from us, do think about subscribing to our YouTube channel and checking out some of the other online classes we have on our website, whether they are free or paid ones. There's loads of different techniques on there, lots to learn, and we pretty much try and cover anything under the embroidery umbrella, so I'm sure there'll be something that's also of interest to you. Until next time, it's bye from me.